Welcome, everybody. My name is Gabriel Boslett. I am one of the founding members of the Good Trouble Coalition. And I'm here with Bryce Gustafson and Morgan Daly to discuss the HHC versus Talevski Supreme Court case that's upcoming. We're glad that you guys are all on. We have a Q&A part of the webinar where you can put in questions at any time. And I will moderate that and throw those to the speakers. We'll probably save most of those at the end. If there's any burning ones, I'll stop them as we're going through. But it's great to have everybody here. And so feel free to put some questions into the Q&A. Morgan, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Cool. Thanks, Gabe. Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. My name is Morgan Daly. I am the Director of Public Policy with the Indiana Statewide Independent Living Council. We are a statewide disability justice and disability advocacy organization. My pronouns are she, hers, and I identify as someone with multiple invisible disabilities. For a quick visual description, I'm wearing a green sweater, glasses, long brown hair. There's a bookshelf bed and a window behind me. For reference, I'm also an attorney. I don't claim to know the case super well, but if you do have legal questions, I'm happy to try and answer those for you. And I will pass it over to Bryce.
Thank you, Morgan, and thank everyone for being here today. My name is Bryce Gustafson. I am the program organizer with the Citizens Action Coalition. CAC, we are Indiana's oldest and largest consumer and environmental rights group. We mainly focus on utility issues, holding the monopoly utility companies accountable, but we dabble here and there on issues like this as well. I've been with CAC since 2009. For the last 3 years, I've been an organizer with Citizens Action Coalition. This issue, I should say, is very, very complicated. We are going to do our best to keep it simple for folks. There's really, in my mind, 3 different prongs to this case. That is how we got here, the case itself, and the efforts to shut this case down. So we're going to kind of take it that way. Morgan and I are just kind of going to go back and forth on this. But to start, for folks that are kind of unaware of Health and Hospital Corporation, it's a municipal corporation here in Marion County, i.e. Indianapolis, and it services not only the city of Indianapolis, but through its nursing home system, 78 nursing homes all across the state. So HHC back in about 2003 decided to start buying up distressed nursing homes. The former CEO of HHC and the former CEO of American Senior Communities decided to make that a reality because they found a loophole in the Medicaid law that would allow county hospitals the ability to bring in more money if they owned public nursing homes. And there was no stipulation in this Medicaid law that said that all this money that they were bringing in had to go to the nursing homes. So they concocted this scheme, if you will, to create this system. HHC at the time had 1 nursing home, and that was on the property of Wishard Hospital, which is now Eskenazi. They now have 78, as I said, and it's hard telling how much extra money they've gotten from the federal government. Morgan might have a better idea of that, but that's the issue. This whole thing's about 20 years in the making, and that's part of the reason why. But Morgan, do you have an answer to that quandary? No. Okay. And what that's allowed HHC to do is not only bring in a ton of extra money, federal money that is supposed to be going to the nursing homes, or should be, I should say. It's allowed them to build things like Eskenazi, build clinics, buy properties around the city. There's one in our neighborhood, Twin Air Shopping Center, and it's caused some problems over the years. There was a really excellent expose by the Indy Star, recommended reading if you really want to dig a little bit deeper into this. It's called Careless. It was started coming out right as COVID hit. So I think a lot of folks, kind of myself included, skipped over it a little bit, but it explains all this information in detail. But through the years, they built Eskenazi, but there was also a big scandal between American Senior Communities, the HHC's nursing home operator. The former CEO of American Senior Communities was indicted on federal charges along with 4 other people because he was setting up shell companies to help run the nursing homes. So long story short, the system has been very, very problematic. And I think, in my opinion, we're seeing the culmination of this problematic system that has been set up in the form of this case. I'm going to stop talking a little bit. I'm going to pass it over to Morgan. Anything you want to fill in there? I kind of zipped over that, but I appreciate it.
Yeah, sure. And I think I'll just summarize what Bryce is saying, that this isn't new, and what HHC has been doing has been happening for a long time, and it has harmed a lot of Hoosiers and is continuing to harm Hoosiers. And then if it's okay, can I answer the question that's in the Q&A really quickly? It asks, what power do the members have? What degree should they be held responsible for HHC's actions? And should activism target HHC board members? So they are the party in this case that's being represented. So the board members can vote to not take this case. They have all of the power to make this stop. And so yes, all of the activism, or most of the activism, there's a couple of other routes and we'll talk about that later, should be directed at these individual board members. And I'll drop a link in the chat with their names and their bios so you can know who they are. I might even, when I pull it up, read their names out loud because I think it's important that we recognize who these people are and hold them responsible.
Yeah, thank you, Morgan. And on that note, there are 7 HHC board members. They are appointed, 3 of them are appointed by the mayors here in Indianapolis, 2 by the City-County Council, and 2 by the county commissioners. There's a rotating appointment process. They're appointed for 4 years. The idea is that they have a little bit of leeway. You know, they're not directly accountable to those governmental bodies, but those folks, again, if you look at the power structure of HHC, they're up top, CEO, everybody else is below them. So,
and Bryce, if it's cool with you, can I read their names really quickly in case y'all know them? You can give them a call, send them a text.
Please do.
It's Gregory Fairbach, Carl Drummer, Robert Lazard, Dr. Gita Karnik Mantravati, Monica Crane, Thomas Hannafy, and Beverly Mukes-Gaither. So if you know those folks, please reach out to them and express your concerns or ask questions.
Thank you.
And Kelly will put the link into the chat here for everybody.
Yeah, and just worth noting, most of those board members are very new because of the expose of Carolus. What happened there in August of 2020, the former CEO, Matt Gutwein, resigned under pressure from the board members. And I'm not exactly clear with what happened after that, but a lot of new board members came in, and that'll come into play when we talk about the case here in just a minute. But to my knowledge, there's only been 3 people on the board: Bob Lazard, Carl Drummer, and Gregory Fairbach, who were who have served on the HHC board past a year. So,
hey Bryce, really quickly,
Yep.
Someone said that Gabe and I are a lot louder than you, so if you could speak a little louder, that would be helpful.
sure.
Thanks.
Is that better? I've got the microphone here, so and in that system steps this Supreme Court case. Georgie Talevski was a retired steel worker in his 70s, and by all accounts healthy, fit, but developed dementia at around the age of 74, I believe. And his family who love him and care for him and everything else, but they just couldn't manage to help him through his day-to-day. His daughter is a lawyer. His wife, I'm not sure what she did, but she was retired. So they looked into nursing home facilities, and they're out of Valparaiso. They went to the well-recommended nursing home, Valparaiso Care and Rehabilitation, not really understanding any of this history, and soon found out, through visiting Georgie and at that facility, that he seemed to be kind of out of it. And complained, took their complaints to the Indiana Public, help me out, Morgan.
I think
Board of
they
Health?
took their
Board of Health.
complaint to the Board of Health. Yeah, first, I think they talked to an ombudsman and then they suggested they go to the Board of Health.
Excellent. And that process is very hard to do, apparently, but they did get a resolution at the Board of Health. A administrative law judge ruled in their favor, saying that VCR, Valparaiso Care and Rehabilitation, was excessively chemically restraining him. According to their lawsuit, in retaliation, that facility ended up moving him in the after hours to another facility. He had been going to another facility, coming back, coming back, but without proper giving the family a heads up, they moved him to another facility and kept him there for 9 months. And that's what kind of sprung this case. His daughter and his wife, obviously, but decided to sue the state, or sue HHC and Valparaiso Care at the federal court level, Northern Indiana Federal District Court. The federal court dismissed the case, and the family appealed to the Seventh Circuit Appeals Court out of Chicago, and won unanimously. And that should have probably been the end of it. But about a year ago, I remember this distinctly because I wasn't following this case all that much, but I saw an article from the Indy Star that said, HHC, actually the one I saw after was, but HHC was deciding to take this case to petition to the Supreme Court. The one that really got my attention was the one that said that Attorney General Todd Rokita and 16 other like-minded attorneys general jumped on board to support HHC's position. And I say that got my attention because I'm sure a lot of folks on this call, understand the dynamics between the state and the city of Indianapolis. They don't get along very well. It doesn't happen very often. The state seems like anything the city wants to do that's good for people, they come in behind them and pass laws to make it harder for them to improve people's lives. So it really set off some alarm bells in my head, and I just kind of put it away. Didn't think about it until May 2nd, which was when they announced which cases they were going to take. And I think it was a couple hours before or after that announcement that this case was going to be heard at the Supreme Court was when the Dobbs leak came out. So kind of got buried once again. The lead got buried on this case. But we kind of talked to some folks around in the community. We have I should have started with that, but we have a wide variety of a coalition of groups that are working on this issue. But some that I'm not personally familiar with until we started working on this. But we started marshaling our resources, so to speak. And it took me a long time to get my head completely wrapped around all this. But at the same time that we were working on getting this going, the abortion issue was happening here in Indiana. We were the first state in the country to, have the State House address the Dobbs decision. But in the meantime, we started going to board meetings at the HHC. We started going to City Council, ringing the alarm bells about this. In my personal experience, my first meeting at the HHC board meeting, I was a little bit concerned or confused, or just, I guess confused is a better word for it, because I walked in, I was the only person in the public there. There was 4 board members, 2 were online and 2 were in person, and the whole board meeting lasted 9 minutes. And I was like, what's going on here? This is supposed to be, kind of multi-billion-dollar public institution. And so just kind of set up a little bit of alarm bells on my head as far as that goes. But the next board meeting in June, we came back and we had some of our people that joined us that time, and it was a bigger affair. There was a lot more going on. I think they do important work. I'm not sure how it works, but that was when our friend Mike Ollis from Our Revolution got up and spoke about it. And he was very passionate about it. And after the board meeting, one of the board members came up and said, "Can you tell me more about this? I haven't heard anything about this." And that was, again, one of those things like, what is going on here? So we looked in, and this is Morgan and other folks were involved at that point, but we started talking, and we looked back at the meeting minutes for the board meetings and found out that there was no discussion about the Supreme Court case whatsoever in the board. And I'll let Morgan take it over from there because she sprung into action at that point.
And this is another confusing legal thing. And I just want to back up because Bryce was like, it took me a minute to wrap my head around what this case was and what was happening. I read it 10 times before I thought I understood it. And I still think I didn't understand it. It took having a lot of conversations with a lot of folks because 1983 and spending clause, which Bryce will get to, are both really confusing. But what's not so confusing is Indiana's open door law. They're called sunshine laws in some other states, where if you receive so much government funding, or there's a couple of other triggers. HHC is a municipal organization, the way they're created in law, so they're subject to Indiana open door law. You have to hold public votes and have public conversations on certain things that happen. And so we worked, a bunch of folks spent a lot of time going through years and years of meeting minutes and notes from HHC board meetings. This case was never brought up, discussed, or voted on. So the coalition was like, can someone just submit an open door complaint? To which I did. And then Luke Britt, Indiana's public access counselor, came back with an opinion that said, yes, they were in violation of Indiana's open door law. Mostly due to the gravity that this is a Supreme Court case and this law exists. And if it doesn't exist for people voting on whether or not to take a Supreme Court case, then what is the point? I'll drop a link to his opinion in the chat. I think it's incredible, and he did a really good job.
Morgan, when you talk about that, are you going to talk more about that? Because when you talk about that, what does that mean by the fact that he made that ruling? How does that operationalize?
Yeah, good question. He actually even says in his opinion, he doesn't know what this means moving forward. We were hopeful that there would have been some type of legal way to stop the case at the Supreme Court level because there was a violation of state law, but it doesn't necessarily work that way. And there's like a weird time frame. So instead, what you can do is take legal action to have a judge review the case, find one way or the other. And if they find that there was a violation, it fines them individually. It's not a lot of money. And it also prevents them from doing the same thing in the future. And so I did work with attorney Bill Groth, who filed against each HHC trustee for the violation. And that is currently pending. So really all that will happen is that we'll get heard in front of a judge. They will make a decision on Luke's opinion. If the judge, which I can't imagine they don't, but you never know, finds that they violated open door law, there will be fines imposed, and then there will be kind of a statement that says, don't behave this way again.
So in essence, it has no teeth, truthfully. I mean, really, as far as the case moving forward. Okay.
Yeah, doesn't have a lot of teeth. From an advocacy perspective, it's just a good way to uncover that this happened. It's not the first time it's happened, and we want to make it stop happening. We want to make sure that when big things or anything really that is required to be heard by the public is actually being heard. Because in that 9-minute meeting Bryce had, there were probably things that needed to be heard and voted on in the public space that just aren't. It's not happening.
Yeah, they have executive meetings. Yeah, and before Councilor Britt's decision was made, there was a letter from Fagery Drinker, HHC's lawyers, saying we do this, you know, the executives handle all this stuff. The board doesn't do the day-to-day legal stuff. Just worth noting. Thanks for bringing up Section 1983 too, Morgan. So that's I'm not a lawyer. I'll leave it to you to correct me if I'm wrong here, but the original case was about two pieces of I need your help on this, Morgan, the federal. I always
So
get
there's
this
a
one.
nursing home bill of rights, which grants patients rights who are nursing home residents, and there's a list of things. And the other is having a private right of action to enforce those, which just means as an individual, because there's state money coming in, that you can sue in federal court.
And that was the original lawsuit from the Taleveski family, was involuntary transfer and excessive chemical restraint. There were more complaints apparently, but they narrowed it down to that. The Supreme Court only rules, they get about 7,000 petitions every year. They only take up about 60 to 80 cases. And so it's very, 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 very hard to get a case in front of the Supreme Court. Unbeknownst to anybody, and I had to find this out kind of later on, but there was another question that was added that had nothing to do with nursing homes whatsoever. And that's question one in this case. And that's the reason I think everybody's here. And that's one of the big reasons why we're all up in arms about this, because it deals with Section 1983's ability. I should dial it back here, but it deals with the whole social safety net. Folks on Medicaid, SNAP, TANF. Section 1983, I'm reverse engineering. I apologize, folks. It's been a long day, but.
And Bryce, I'm going to drop a link to Lauren's video in the chat, which is like a 16-minute video that kind of really explains all of this law, because it can be very confusing.
Sure.
You're doing great.
Appreciate that. Section 1983 was passed in the 1871 Ku Klux Klan Act, and it was during Reconstruction. It says that when a state violates your civil rights, you have the ability to stand up and fight back against the state in federal court. It's been used in a lot of different issues, police brutality, all kinds of different ways. It basically enshrines an individual's rights, civil rights, into law. Without Section 1983, you would have no way of defending those rights. Since the advent of our social safety net, it has been used as an accountability mechanism for state and local governments. Like the state wants to take away people's Medicaid, they could use Section 1983 to enforce their civil rights. So that's really what got this case in front of the Supreme Court. And did a little digging about this, but some of the justices, Thomas, Scalia, who's passed on, obviously, Alito, they have been in their opinions in the past 20 years or so, they have been questioning Section 1983's role in these social safety net programs. So really what HHC's lawyers did by adding that question one, saying, we question the ability for Section 1983 to be used in any of these programs, is set this up for the Supreme Court. It was like serving it on a silver platter. And without question one, this case wouldn't have made it to the Supreme Court. That's not my opinion. That's everybody that we talk to, all these law professors and whatnot. So that's to bring it back to where we're kind of at now. It's been kind of frustrating as far as talking with folks about this, because we've heard from HHC and they've kind of moved their goalposts. But initially it was like, don't worry about this case. It's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. And then once, just kind of ignoring question one, just making it about the nursing home patients and the question two, I should say. So that's what we've been kind of dealing with. Some not exactly the most forthright framing of the case.
Bryce is nicer to me. I think everyone's just lying through their teeth, but there's that.
I was trying to be diplomatic. Thank you. I have a lot of things to say that I won't say on this forum tonight, but yeah, it's been very frustrating. And HHC, just to put things in a little bit of perspective, HHC's annual budget is larger than the city of Indianapolis and Marion County. $2.1 billion plus. They have even throughout the bumpy scandals that have happened over the last years, they have a tremendous amount of power here in Indianapolis. And there seems to be some reticence to push back against that power from folks in charge. So that's my nice way of saying that, but yeah.
So can we go back to sort of question one and the concern, the root concerns that people should really have in regards to this case if HHC wins on question one in front of the Supreme Court? And Morgan, will you talk a little bit about, from a legal perspective, what that would mean for social safety net programs, disability programs, et cetera?
I will do my best. So the spending clause is basically saying when state money or federal money is involved in a program, that an individual has a right to sue in federal court if their rights are violated. If right now you have a lot of programs or a handful of programs where it's already codified in state law. So if you think about fair housing law and rights there, those aren't impacted because they already exist in federal law that was created by Congress. But what isn't protected by laws that are already created by Congress are things like Medicaid, food stamps, veterans benefits, foster care dollars. And so if you receive that money, and let's put it in the nursing home context to make everything the same. If you are in a nursing facility and you're using Medicaid to pay for that care, which is most nursing home residents, and I won't get into that mess, but just believe me on this one, most nursing home residents are using Medicaid to pay for their care. Maybe not when they come in, but eventually. If HHC won on this spending clause issue, they would no longer have the right to sue in federal court if they were abused or neglected. And that's interesting because if you were private paying in a nursing facility, you still could bring lawsuits in those cases. And so if, let's say, you're discriminated against in your application for food stamps, well, because there's state and federal money tied to that, you could bring a discrimination claim based on race because that's already written into the law, but we don't have LGBTQ protections. And so if you're discriminated against because you are a gay man, you no longer could bring that case because a decision in favor of HHC would prevent that from happening. Does that help? I know it's
it does, and it's extremely complicated, actually, the relationship between 1983 and the spending clause, and it's probably beyond the scope of what people really need to understand, except to say that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's larger than just like people in nursing homes. It extends to people being denied Medicaid benefits in unduly ways, all of these sort of administrative ways people can sort of fall through the cracks and then not have a legal recourse if this case goes through and question one is decided by SCOTUS.
Exactly. And the Indy Star wrote another article today that's incredible. And it actually gives a couple of stories and examples of people who have utilized the spending clause, particularly in Medicaid cases, and they would completely lose the right to be able to do that. It's funny because the 1983 claim, so question 2, and the spending clause claim, question 1, are so distant from each other that a lot of news media won't pick it up because it's very confusing. Like, we don't know how question 1 got here. Well, question 1 got there because HHC's lawyers knew that if they added question 1, the Supreme Court would take it because they wanted to take that case. And so it's really confusing to everyone how question 1, the spending clause Medicaid case, got added. And that's why.
And I imagine, since this case was decided in favor of the Talevskis at the circuit level, that the Supreme Court taking it up signals that they're interested in actually overturning that ruling.
Yes.
I mean, otherwise they generally would just say that the circuit's ruling stands, that they're at least willing to hear arguments and there are enough of the justices that are interested in the substance of this question that this is relatively likely in some way that the Talevskis are going to lose some portion of the questions in front of the court.
And what's really frustrating for people who have been advocating in the disability and aging and nursing home space for a long time is that the Talevski 7th Circuit win was a big deal. It did a lot of good things for folks with disabilities and aging Hoosiers or anyone within the 7th Circuit's jurisdiction. And it's happened in a couple of other federal circuits as well. Usually the Supreme Court doesn't take up those issues until there's a circuit split. So 7, 5, and 3 go one way and 2, 1, and 4 go the other. And then the Supreme Court will take that up to make a decision so it's not different everywhere in the US. That really didn't happen here. So it's frustrating for folks because they got this really good precedent, and it probably would have stayed and lasted for quite some time before it was heard at the Supreme Court level. But with question 1 being added on to it, now it's kind of being heard prematurely.
So in regards to getting back to sort of board process, I know there was a meeting about a week ago, Bryce, where there was a larger contingent of people from the public there, and from what I heard, they didn't take this issue up at all. Is that correct?
That's right. And you know, I'm not trying to be too critical of our leadership here in Indianapolis, but we were just trying to get their attention. Like, you all need to do something about this, and showing up and talking with them. And they finally did. The City-County Council came out with a statement. The mayor came out with a statement. Andre Carson, Congressman Carson, came out with a statement. Some state lawmakers, right about a few days before the board meeting. And we got there a little bit early that day, and we were expecting some kind of recognition from the board that, these, at least, don't pay attention to us. We're just a bunch of activists, but some kind of recognition from the elected officials. And they were apparently they were meeting with their appellate attorney beforehand, and I guess he must have told them something that really convinced them just to stay the course. And so they did their hour-long meeting.
Bryce, I'm so sorry. Can I interrupt you? Because this one.
Yes, please.
So I have been told, obviously this is unconfirmed, that HHC's lawyer came in and told them they have a fiscal duty not to withdraw this case. To effing who? Your fiscal duty is to aging and disabled Hoosiers because you're running nursing homes, not to the bottom dollar of HHC. Again, unconfirmed, but if that's what's really happening, there are a lot of issues there.
So that actually brings up a question. So, and I don't know if either of you have the answer to this, but what is the history of these cases with HHC? Like, have they been sued 1 billion times via this mechanism that they're really, there's a lot to protect here? Or
the Section 1983 for nursing homes has only been used twice, or excuse me, there's only been 2 lawsuits. The first one was dropped in the Southern Indiana District Court. This is the furthest this one's gone.
And this is the second one?
Second one.
So there's been one before and then this one.
And that
one was dropped.
Dropped it. He just dropped it on his own. Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess okay.
So,
It's just confusing as to what are they trying to protect? There was a question in the chat. I'm confused why HHC feels they need this extra protection. And I agree. What
I've heard from HHC, not publicly, but from folks that we can trust, is that they're afraid of frivolous lawsuits. And I'm sorry, but civil rights aren't frivolous. And it's not like you can just turn on the faucet and just start suing state agencies under Section 1983. This stuff is very, very hard to get through. Again, I'm not a lawyer. Morgan can attest to that. But so it's almost like hitting instead of using your thumb to put in a thumbtack, it's like using a jack or a sledgehammer on this.
And
it's really,
this
really
might
strange.
Be relevant to folks. So the reason that Georgie Talevski, I can never pronounce the name right, and Susie is a dear friend of mine, used 1983 is because Indiana has some of the strictest medical malpractice laws in the country, and it's almost impossible to actually get a suit against a nursing home for abuse and neglect, because before you can even really sue, you have to go through a review board first. And that process is very politically entwined, as I'm sure you can guess. And so 1983 is kind of the way to say, well, this medical malpractice route isn't going to work for us. Now we can have a private right of action under the nursing home bill of residence rates. And so if you've had loved ones in nursing homes or had a medical accident or experienced malpractice, you may be familiar with that. And that's kind of how we got to the 1983 claim.
But I mean, the malpractice question I find interesting, you know, as a physician. I understand malpractice cases against physicians, but when you hear this case, this is a system-wide malpractice, not on an individual. And often you have to be able to point to specific harms by specific actions. And this is a system-wide harm, which makes it, does it even fit into the malpractice category?
It is a system-wide harm. There was talk in early stages about bringing a medical malpractice claim against the doctor who prescribed the massive amounts of psychotropic drugs.
Okay, fair enough.
You're right, Gabe. I mean, they've proven time and time again, this isn't to improve the nursing home care. This isn't rocket science. You just have to have more people there, more workers and that kind of thing. Instead of doing that, let's just take a case to the Supreme Court. So off my soapbox. But back to your original question, we showed up, we were there. There was 21 people who spoke, state lawmakers, city, county council, and they had a moment before we spoke for new business. It was an awkward pause moment, and nobody raised their hand to say, let's have a vote for this. And it was shocking. To be honest, no acknowledgement, no, again, forget us, but for state lawmakers to stand up there and to make their voice heard, and for the board just to completely ignore it was fairly shocking, in my opinion. So, where were we?
So we've been through at least as much as everyone can understand it, the sort of Section 1983 and the spending clause. We've been through the Talevski case. We've been through sort of the process that the board has, or probably it's more accurate to say has not been through, to sort of vet this case before it went before the Supreme Court. I guess the question from my perspective is, what are the steps going forward now?
So there's a rule, Rule 46 in the Supreme Court. It's only about 10 years old, that says at any time during the process, the petitioners, which is HHC, American Senior Communities, Valparaiso Care and Rehabilitation, they can pull their petition. So a lot of there was some lack of information, I guess, saying that if the oral arguments start, then it's over. That's not true. But the other thing is, as far as we can tell, Rule 46 has never been used. It's only about 10 years old. So this would be the first time ever, because it doesn't look like they're going to have an emergency meeting to vote to pull this petition. So the next step is, from what we understand, the city's going to come out, City County Council is going to have a resolution on Monday, encouraging them to pull the petition. And then which a few of us will show up to on that. But the 15th is the next board meeting. Starts at 2:00 in the Fagery Drinker boardroom, and we'll be there again to voice our opinions and talk to the board directly. I hope that they're more willing to address this issue this time and not just pretend like we don't exist, but we're not sure yet. We'll have to see what shakes out, but we want to get as many people there as possible. We had about 30 in total.
That's a public meeting, Bryce?
It's a public meeting. And sorry, the meeting's at Eskenazi Hospital. So it's on the south side of Eskenazi.
On the first floor, correct?
First floor. Yep. And we'll see. I mean, they made it, Bob Lazard, the chairman, made it very pointed that they don't have to allow people the ability to speak at those meetings, and they restricted everybody's speaking time at 2 minutes. So maybe they don't let us speak, but we're going to show up anyway, and we're going to keep showing up until they do the right thing here, which to me, it's a no-brainer. Like, why would a hospital that is, you know, a system, a municipal corporation that is tasked with protecting the most vulnerable people in the community, working on a lawsuit that would blow a hole in the safety net? So I'll stop there, but.
And then I'm just going to let people know that oral arguments are scheduled for Election Day, November 8th. Shameless plug, please remember to vote. And you can watch oral arguments on YouTube. The Supreme Court has a live streaming site. Sometimes the quality is a little crappy and it's a little delayed, but you will be able to watch those, and they will also be recorded and uploaded. And a lot of people ask, well, is there anything we can do after oral arguments before the Supreme Court on November 8th? Yes, they have until a decision is made to withdraw that case.
Which is usually in the summer.
Yeah, so it's usually like 6 months. So we have, after November 8th, quite some time to still push them to withdraw. I will say that in the history of Supreme Court cases, you haven't seen a withdrawal after oral arguments happen, but I like to believe that this could be the instance where it does.
But since there are how many, 3 petitioners here? If HHC dropped their petition and the other 2 remained, what would happen then?
A wonderful question. And I asked this question for months before I finally got an answer, Gabe. I adore you. So Valparaiso Care and Rehab is just a DBA for the location of American senior communities. So they're kind of one and the same there. So you're really looking at HHC and American senior communities. American Senior Communities is who HHC contracts to manage all of these nursing homes. HHC could withdraw, and technically ASC could still take the case on their own, although it is highly unlikely for that to happen because they're pretty intertwined contractually. And we are pretty confident that HHC has the political clout and power to get ASC to also withdraw when they do. Not the answer you wanted to hear. I know it's also not the answer I wanted to hear.
None of us want to hear that answer, but if that's the case, I mean, we'll have to pivot and put pressure on American senior communities, and you know.
And Valparaiso Care and Rehab, you can look who runs those, who's in charge of those, who their CEOs are, and so the advocacy would just shift, right?
So it sounds like at this point, the pressure point is the board of HHC, the 7-member board. You read their names before. We put the link in. It's publicly available information on HHC's website who the board members are. So if folks know people on that board, personally contacting them would be wonderful. If not, I think Morgan, you put a link to use CAC's website to send an email. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And then also showing up on the 15th at the board meeting on the first floor of Eskenazi Hospital to voice opinions and public testimony.
I will add, getting a hold of the mayor would be great too. And, you know, when he came out with his statement, talking about narrowing the case, a lot of us scratched our head because that's not how this works. You can't just ask the Supreme Court to ignore the question that they took the case, you know, the question that got the case in front of him in the first place. So he has up until this point hasn't made any comments since the board meeting, and it would be great to hear from him. So do we have a number for the mayor, Morgan?
I do not have a number for the mayor, actually, but
I will get that served.
All right.
So, but yes, everything else, contact the board members. If you have personal connections, that would be great. My feeling, I've talked with a couple of the board members, but my feeling is that they are just listening to their attorneys, which I understand, but you know, at this point, it's like, how many more people do we need to send your way before you really understand the moment here? So
a couple good questions here. First, the first question, the Q&A is, do we know any of the current board members voted? They haven't voted on this at all, correct? That we know of, unless they did an executive session. And then are any of them on the side of dropping the case that we know of? Or
That's a tricky one because you never, it's just like politicians, you don't know where they're going to go until they vote. But we do have some folks that that we feel that would do that. It's a matter of who's going to lead that charge. But it seems like, I don't know, Morgan, if you want to talk about that at all, or if we want to talk about that.
I mean, we can.
Sure.
A lot of HHC trustees in what they do politically and who they are as people should be opposing this case as just like from other things they have done politically. And I'll give you an example. Greg Fairbach is a person with a physical disability. He founded an internship program for students with physical disabilities, many of whom utilize Medicaid and Medicaid services. So it seems rather hypocritical. There are other folks who have similar strange hypocrisies and still standing behind this case, Tom Hannafy being one of those. And so it's mind-boggling to me why these folks haven't actually come out with an opinion on this. And usually they say, well, we can't talk about pending litigation, is the answer that we keep hearing. And so I think there is something going on that's bigger that we don't know about, is my guess in this situation.
And one of the other questions, go ahead, Bryce, sorry.
Well, I was just gonna to hit that point home, to kind of defend a case that they had no involvement with. Like, we gave them the option, like, hey, this is your escape hatch here, and yet.
And in the open door violation, my dearest hope was for the trustees to say, we didn't know about this. We don't stand behind this. This was a violation of state law. Let's drop this and they didn't have to be political about it. No one had to take a political stance. They could just say, this was done wrong. Let's withdraw it. And I guess they still could. And I hope that they do.
And can one of you guys suggest, like, if we called the mayor's office, what would be some verbiage that we would use to sort of, what is the ask? Jane Hartsock asked, this is a good question. What is the ask of the mayor? I mean, what is the mayor's relationship to HHC's board and to Paul Babcock? And so what is the ask specifically?
I would say, he has, or the mayor's office has the ability to appoint 3 of those folks, a majority as far as the 3 prongs go, but do everything within your power, to get this case shut down. I don't know what that looks like internally. According to what I've read through the years about the relationship between the mayor's office and HHC, it's a hands-off approach, but I think this calls for a hands-on approach from everyone. And I feel like, just to go on a side tangent here, but I feel like a lot of people don't understand like how bad this is going to be for our city, not just reputationally, but for the actual people that live here. We're talking about 1/4 to 1/3 of the US population will be impacted by this. And Indiana is always leading the charge with bad things, just like they did over the summer. And, it's not going to be good. And the day that sometime in May or June, when HHC wins on question 1, question 2, whatever, we're going to be on the map as the place where civil rights for the most vulnerable people went to die. And we can't let that happen. So, not exactly, sorry, I went on my tangent there, but not exactly a packaged response, but I would say, please do everything within your power to make HHC pull this petition.
And there was someone in the chat earlier who talked about the mayor's statement and that he said it went too far, that it should have stayed the 1983 question 2 case and question 1 shouldn't have been added. And he wants to narrow the case. I don't actually know how this happens, but we have consulted with Supreme Court attorneys. They could technically choose to narrow the case and just go back to the 1983 claim. Whether or not SCOTUS would still agree to hear it, we're not sure. I would suggest, as a nursing home residents and disability rights advocate, that the entire case be withdrawn. We don't want the 1983 question 2 to be heard either, because we don't think it will be found for the rights of nursing home residents. And so I think that asked to Hogsett is you need to speak up on this. You need to say that it needs to be withdrawn, and you need to make sure that HHC withdraws it. Plain and simple.
Thank you, Morgan.
I guess it's not that plain and simple, but that's an easy ask, I guess.
Any messing around with SCOTUS right now is just playing with fire. I think we all understand that. And I hope some people don't, obviously, but I think everybody on this call understands that.
There's another question in the Q&A, Morgan, that may be in regards to the main versus, can't even pronounce that other word. I don't know how to answer that question.
Yeah, I just responded to Taylor. I'm not familiar with
Okay.
that. But I'll look it up after this, and I know Taylor. I'll send an email. So, yeah.
All right, closing thoughts. Any closing thoughts, you guys?
I'm scrolling through the chat to make sure I didn't miss anything.
Thank you so much for everybody for being here. I'm sure everybody's seen that Charlie Day meme. He's got the billboard behind him and all the different strings and everything. And that's how I feel right now. So I appreciate if I hope I was fairly coherent in what I was saying, but it's been a very long struggle on this, and none of this should have happened. Not just because of the public access stuff, but our city and our community is better than this, and we should never have been in this situation. And it's frustrating, it's disappointing that we are, but we're going to do everything we can to continue the fight to shut this down. And it's good to have some allies and folks that are interested in this, and I hope you keep helping us continue that fight. So
I'm dropping my email and my personal cell phone number in the chat. Feel free to email questions or ask for advocacy opportunities, or call or text. Really, any way that we can help everyone else be engaged, happy to do so.
Perfect. Thank you guys so much for doing this. I'm sure that Citizen Action Coalition and Good Trouble will have stuff coming out in the coming week in regards to sort of action items for people to do for all of their members. So just kind of keep an eye on that. And that's a good way to sort of get information on the upcoming dates and times and stuff.
Real quick, there was a question about where we're at on social media. Gosh, CAC, we've been doing our best to share as much as we can on social media, Twitter, Facebook.
And I'm putting Bryce's Twitter, I think it's called a feed. I don't know, but there's one post and there's a bunch of posts underneath it. And it's I don't know how Twitter works. It's a wonderful timeline of what has gone on with links to all of the articles. So if you want everything in one like condensed place, I think that's the best way to get it right now.
It's been tough.
Agreed.
We talked about doing kind of a coalition with social media. And I think our problem is that we're all overworked, underpaid, and we don't necessarily have the social media skills that we should. But so yeah, just kind of keep track of the CAC social media, and we'll keep folks updated. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. This was great.
Thank you, Gabe.
Thanks for having us and hosting a platform where we can talk about it. Most of the time people don't listen, or at least that's what it feels like.
This case is hamstrung by its own complexity. I agree with you, Morgan. Your comment that the media hasn't picked it up because it's too complex is, I think, absolutely true. It's a shame.
Oh, on that note, anything that's coming from Tony Cook and Johnny Magdaleno from the Indy Star, follow that.
Today was awesome. Today's article was really good.
And I tried to find that to put it with the personal stories, and it's lost in the ether. And now it says I have no more Indy Star views available. So if somebody has that and wants to drop it, that would be great.
Is AJ Sinha still on here? He can drop a non-paywalled thing if he's still on here. Let's see if he is. He'll probably drop it in the chat for you. He's the paywall ninja.
I need that skill in my life. Can you call me after this and tell me how you do that?
There it is. There you go.
Thanks, AJ.
All right, you guys, I'm going to get out of here. It's
Have
good
a
to
nice
see you all. Yep.
Thank you, everybody.